got good sound. We're going, today's the 28th, Wednesday, and before I get lost in all kinds of stuff, the class voted Friday, no. Mr. French decided Friday would be the day that you have all your information on your midterm paper and who you will be talking about. You'll have 1 week. It's not a 10-page paper, as I said last Monday. So, all right. Here's a quote for today, number 24. It's a little slang in there for you. Hope you enjoy it. No have-to, gotta's, or shouldas. Enjoy the moment. Meaning you don't have to, you don't got to, and you should have done this, but you didn't. Get rid of that idea and just enjoy the moment.
Kind of like the YOLO?
Yes.
Alright, cool. Cool.
Say that again.
YOLO?
Yo-yo. What's yo-yo? That's what it sounds like. I was on that machine too long yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
I love, you gotta watch me in there, because when I get bouncing, I'll go,
What machine
Sorry
is
about
that?
that, class.
What machine is that?
Sonic, it's a machine down at the Court Club that helps people get rid of certain things and problems. It's a medical wonder, to be honest. Okay, we're going to start chapter 8. And when we left off on 7, we discussed how bad and how corrupt things were getting in the fight between. So now with this chapter in mind, Thomas Jefferson is elected, takes office in 1801, and immediately, like anything else, you can think of Trump in this way, but it's not called society, but maybe some people would call it Trump society. But the Jeffersonian society, in how the Republican Party and the Federalists change. And the Society of Jefferson is actually marks the beginning of what we call the Republican Party, for your information. And if you're following in your text, it starts on page 100. I don't know if you're doing this, but I highly suggest at the beginning in every chapter there's always I call it an introduction, kind of like my World Thought book is even better at this. Limits of equality, it's kind of an overview of things in the chapter. And if you read through that, you kind of get and take the time to read through that, you get a good picture or feeling of what the chapter is about. Now, what's becoming in the Society of Jefferson, all of America is changing, and supposedly all of it's good, and I looked at it as good as a somewhat of a history guy, but territory is vital to the survival of any country, and who controls your territory. And if you take a look on page 101, you look at the territories that are still open to be claimed, and on 101, the green territory is the map that we looked at Monday in chapter 7. It kind of shows you what is considered expansion beyond the Appalachian Mountains. And have any of you been back that way? The Appalachian Mountains are not very big. They're old mountains, of course. If they were jagged and new like the Rockies, that's relatively new era of time in history. They only may be 1 million years old, where the Appalachian Mountains might be 5 million. Just making that up now. Okay, but look at the territory expansions, and I just want to read right below that. North American in 1800 as Thomas Jefferson was president. In the 1790s, and this is that battle we had with the president before, Adams and all that stuff. In the 1790s, diplomatic agreements with Britain, or the British, Spain, the defeat of the Native Americans at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, it's something that you might want to be aware of, Fallen Timbers, opened the way to the U.S. settlement of land beyond the Appalachian Mountains. Now that's the green section, and there is some identification there. Gives you an idea where the current states are. Notice that Ohio is not a state yet, but it will be. And Indiana and all that, you can kind of see what's going to happen. Only part of Tennessee was a state, in Kentucky and Georgia. Look how big Georgia is right now. The Mississippi Territory is not a state yet, but they will become states, and they will and Florida's the same way. It goes all the way across into what we would be known as Texas and Louisiana, that way. Just get a picture in your mind, geography-wise, of what the territory. And then the thing that Adams left us, Louisiana, and notice it says ceded by Spain to France. When we had the disagreement, and Adams tried to, and he did keep us out of war with France, Spain retreated and gave that territory, which we call the Louisiana Purchase, to France. And Adams and Jefferson actually, in the back of his mind, knew something like this was going to occur. And they were plotting and planning. And eventually we do purchase what we call Louisiana Purchase from France for a sum of money and some special considerations. And those considerations were in trade. And, so keep that in mind. Notice New Spain, they receded that Louisiana territory and backed off, which would be the whole southern part of the United States into Mexico. If you got a good memory of a map, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, they're all kind of in that area. And then the Oregon country, what we call the Oregon Territory, was still being claimed by Great Britain, Spain, and ourselves, and that comes later. Now, I want you to identify these territories in 5 areas, okay? Take a look at the map and then write these down. The first one is what we just call the United States, that's the green. The second one is the upper British North America, which is Canada. That is, I don't know what color that is. It says Lower Canada, Upper Canada, British North. Up at the top of the map, label that number 2. Okay, 3, it's just simple, just put Louisiana in the spellings there. You don't have to have that other stuff in there, ceded by Spain. These are just the 5 identifying territories that become by. New Spain, which is the bottom and to your left on your map. New Spain, that's number 4. In New Spain, and you can even put Mexico with it, because the boundaries between that area and actual Mexico is not established yet. It's just a territory. And 5 would be the Oregon country. And a lot of things are going to occur in the next 2 chapters in defining the boundaries and what can be done where and with whom and how you're going to control it and govern it. Right now, Thomas Jefferson saw how territories and expansion could help, but the final plan is not set in stone yet. and it's concentrated in that green section, the first section. Okay, Jefferson has some qualities that kind of tick people off and other people liked. And I want to relate this to the current politics. Trump has some qualities that people dislike, and then he has some probably good, strong qualities. Keep in mind both sides. Thomas was that way too. He was an aggressive, outspoken, and you knew, along with a guy named Hamilton, you know that they did some backstabbing, taking advantage of their situation. And this is a kind of politician Jefferson was. Again, he was aggressive, assertive. He was outright, blatantly racist. If you want to accuse me as being a racist, it would be hard to figure out. But with Jefferson, you knew where he stood. The way he spoke, what he did. I want to go and tell you, personally, as a studier of history, he helped us get into a civil war about racism and about freedom of black individuals.
Are you saying that as like a good thing? Like he helped push the issue so where there would have to be a solution? Or did
Well,
he
no.
encourage slavery so much that then
Yes,
Okay.
he encouraged it so much that somebody else took it. Hey, that's not how we're going to be. I would even go to say how much of a Christian was Jefferson in his heart. You know, the value of all people being equal. Now you got to realize we're looking at different era of times, but you know, if you look from biblical times before Christ, you know, we had that same issue. Slavery was really common. It might have not, you know, it was called slavery, but it's just in different forms. It wasn't just Native Americans or African Americans. You know, everybody could have been a slave, depending on what happened to you. Okay. His intentions were to take care of the rich and the upper class because they are to be the rulers and the president. In this case, he was very wealthy, and the equality in all this was to the rich white folks, as he called them, rich white folks. The common, average, middle American, you know, did not exist in his eyes. You know, if you can't get any benefits from us white folks, ta-da, too bad. That's how he believed. As far as outward influence from outward countries like British, French, that were in Spain itself, he didn't want to cause any conflicts. So he took an approach to not being a country that's going to go out yet, because he's going to get some influence and the next president comes in. There's going to be some changing in how they do that. But he didn't want to cause any major waves because he knew it would threaten his, how powerful and how rich he was, if he had to share anything. So, he also believed in the strong central government, but again, only for the upper class and the rich, so they have control of everything. Now, I don't know if you are hearing me clearly, but do you see any other form of a government that we'll be studying more in depth? Some of these things I've said, what do they appear to be? gotta think outside the box.
Socialism?
Government what?
Socialism?
Socialism. Think about it, government control for the rich, in racial terms for the white, or for the privileged. And, we haven't got to socialism terms, the bourgeoisie and, how they labeled and who controlled everything, how you voted, money for the rich, but not for, because that's as far as but the tendency is there. He also saw, as a Republican now, complete control over the Federalist Party. There's still Federalists in Congress, but he's going to do some things to change that. And there's several things you can do. You can campaign to get the Federalists out, not elected, and it just depends on the power structure you have. And believe me, he had it. It didn't go completely the other way, but it got really close. Another goal of his was to cut the national debt at all costs, and he blamed the Federalists and Hamilton for that. They didn't get a chance to reduce that debt yet. And that's who he blamed him on. Okay, current politics again. Who they blaming for this or that? And who's blaming whom? Keep that in mind. Now, in order to squash the lower status people, he urged his Congress to repeal all new direct taxes. So if he believed in lowering our national debt, how's he going to do that, you think? Most people think in order to do that, you have to raise taxes. You have any idea kind of some of the ways we do it nowadays? How do presidents of Congress help reduce? Got to take this current one away. Let's go back to Obama and just prior to Obama. And who was president before Obama? History buffs.
George Bush.
Was it Reagan or is that too far back? Giving you hints. Who is?
Was it Bush? Or
I think it
Bush
was
Jr.
Huh?
Bush Jr.
The Bushes. Okay. Just testing you. You should know a little bit. You don't have to know a whole lot, but there's some things set. Just like you should know something about Hamilton and Jefferson and Adams, not that unless you do become a real big time history buff, and that becomes one of your passions in life. But you should know a little bit about everything, to be honest, so you're informed. That's why I keep saying, well, let's just remind you of today. I want you to relate back and forth. And as we move up as we get closer to the 1900s, I'm going to have to be doing the same thing, and how this stuff in this history evolved. Those 5 areas of territory, he does say these 5 areas of the territory that I gave to you at the start of class, we need to expand, and we can take some of these territories and divide them up and sell parcels out. And anyway, that was his plan. It never did never did occur. But his plan was to abuse some of the territories, sell parts of it back. So if you take a look on your map again on page 101, if the Canadian or the British people at the time, they really weren't Canadians yet of their own country, the British had control. But if they wanted some of that land above the 5 Great Lakes and on over, you know, maybe we can make a deal, because we want part of it and you want part of it, and we'll work something out. And by the way, British government, we owe you a lot of money. Let's say we'll give you this land and you take that, you remove that debt. That's how you got the debt paid back in those days. It doesn't always work that way, but that gives you a good picture of how that movement occurs. Okay, now, a couple more things. The growing population and with the new census, they found out that the majority of the population of New America were young people. Remarkable. And then there were about in the 60 percentiles, somewhere in there. It could, you know, it doesn't set an exact number, and it definitely doesn't tell you that in your text. Of that young population, 20% of that, let's say it's 65%, 20% of that were black. You have to realize how many slaves were brought in from Africa and that area, and how many of them, of course, stayed. They were given a chance, if you remember what we talked about, to go back, but the conditions going back were worse than where they are at, so they stayed and, you know, evolved that way. So anyway, with that first census and the next census, which is they establish in Congress every 10 years. So by 1810, the population they thought was going to be higher, but it's not accurate, but it was somewhere between, this is 5 and 7 million new Americans now, with natural process of births and more immigrants. And you remember what, at the end of Adams' reign in Hamilton and Jefferson in the Alien and Sedition Acts, they were trying to control it that far back, how many people could come in and what type of people. Didn't go over real well yet, and there was no set thing yet, but it's the start of it. And you guys have heard of Ellis Island, I hope. That used to be the only and main way to get into America. You had to go through and be tested, you had to be checked for diseases, you had to register as you came as an immigrant, and Ellis Island was the great big huge building that you filed through.
Don't they still do that?
Huh?
Don't they still do that, like for the Philippines and all that?
Not as a structure, but yeah, to be a naturalized or a citizen, you have to take a test, you have to announce your right hand. Okay? But what I want you to understand is this is where it began. And of course, you always got to have a starting ground for all this. This is another part of our history. Now, last thing I'm going to mention for today. With his presidency first term, about 1803 into 1804, he was able to control or have control through Congress and through some of his power and backward stuff, under the papal stuff, control all but 2 states. And we're going to see we're going to gain some new states, by the way, and not today, we're going to stop. But by Congress's next presidential term, like 1805 to 1809, before they vote in 1810 for the new president, you're going to see even more growth and more changes. But I want you to understand how young and how much control Jefferson had at this time, and that was just establishing things. So, that will be the end for today. Friday, we're gonna spend a lot of time getting your subject, topic, or person for your test paper. I'm gonna call it a test paper, midterm. It's just a written paper. It's not like a true test, but it's gonna be graded. I think I even put on their points already, like 50 points as a midterm paper. I think I called it midterm papers. We'll have that all ready for you. That will give you one full week and the weekend, and the deadline will be that deadline, you guys. You may have to adjust your timetable to get it done. It won't be accepted without great penalty after. Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Look forward to Friday.